This is your Kansas City real estate update for February. We're really drilling down on the difference between Jackson and Johnson County. I'm going to highlight some areas here because the counties are actually going in different directions in regards to some of the numbers. We do have data available for Cass, Platte, Wyandotte County. These are the two counties that we really focus on in regards to a mass market update. But if you have questions about your county, your neighborhood, your individual property, you can always email David at vanoyre.com, or you can send a DM here and we'd be happy to help you with that. Here's what I want to talk about today, though. We have the Jackson and Johnson County market, and we've highlighted, as I dig through this data, I think it's really interesting. I don't think this story is being told. When we look at the Heartland MLS, which is who aggregates all the data of the sales in the area, right? We wait for these market updates to come out, and they give us a blended average of all the counties in the entire area, and that average might be $435,000 for an average sale. But let me give you an example of why this isn't helpful for you. In Johnson County, the average is up in February year over year to $570,000. So if I told you the average sale was $435,000, you think that's a little bit misleading? Johnson County, $570,000. Jackson County, and this is where the story is, as far as I'm concerned, it's very different, only went up nearly flat here at 1.8% growth to $309,000. I mean, that's almost half of the average value in Johnson County. Now, obviously, there's differences between the counties, and some people have preferences on where they'd rather be, but there's a real luxury difference here between the two in terms of where the price is going, what the absorption rate looks like. And this is something that's important for buyers to know, especially if they're looking for the best deal. It's important for sellers as they're continuing to price their property, because we have people in Jackson County, as an example, sometimes will even be confused about what's selling in Kansas, comparing that to your home, or even worse than that probably, because I think it's more likely, is you're looking at 2024 sales data and thinking that has anything to do with the price that you should be selling for now. So that's something that I would have you really consider, especially if your property is over $550,000 in Jackson County. But it's also cooled off a little bit in the Jackson County market over $700,000. That doesn't mean it's not selling for more than it was, when you considered selling it 3 years ago, or if you bought it 10 years ago. That's not what that means. What it means is if you look at a comparable sale that happened at the height of the market in 2024, your home may be different, priced a little bit differently now if you really want to get it sold in the next 30 days. Now, Kansas has a tight 2.5 month supply of homes. We've seen that number in Kansas, right after COVID, as low as 1.7 months. We saw it hover around 1.9 months, which is an incredibly strong seller's market. Now it's up to 2.5 months. That's still by all standards, that is a very strong seller's market. In Missouri, it's climbed to 3.3 months, which might seem kind of close, but if you're coming again, Missouri got all the way down to 1.9 at the height of the market and hovered probably around 2.3, 2.4. Now it's at 3.3. That's an incredible difference in terms of the velocity. That's the supply gap, right? How long it would take if you sold every home that was in the market. Now, the speed and the sales velocity, which is another metric that we look at, 56% of homes in Johnson County will sell within the first 30 days on the market, 56%. Now, I think it's an important number because when I talk to sellers, they believe it's 99% of homes will sell in the first 30 days. But 56% is actually a really good number to be less than 30 days, a very strong number. And then you have the next gap from 30 to 60, 60 to 90. And most of those properties will sell in less than 65 days, but the majority at 56% at under 30 days. Now, this is creating a sense of urgency, and it's roughly 9% higher in Jackson County, meaning that it takes a little bit longer on average to sell a home in Jackson County. When you look at these numbers, I would encourage you to consider very different across every single individual property. Whenever we meet with you to talk about selling your home, I tell you on the appointment the exact amount of days based on your price that it will take to sell your home, which is good to know. Most of the time people say, well, how much can I get? That's the high number. I'm going to list for that. And they say, how much is commission? And you whittle that down, and those are the things we look at. But the next question is, okay, for that price and that commission, When am I going to receive the proceeds? Well, that's a whole different scenario that's rarely ever discussed. You price it at 800,000 and we look at the data, it might take you 90 days to sell your home. If you price it at 775, it might take your home 45 days to sell. And then, just an example, that's not a perfect number, but just an example to consider there when you're selling your home. That's an important question for you to ask. So a deep dive here, what we're calling the winner's circle, just basically the areas that you would want to consider if you're considering buying or selling. These are the areas that are nuanced here. So with price growth in Johnson County being at 11%, buyers are facing higher barriers of entry, especially if you're a first-time buyer. So 4% of homes are available for under 300 grand in Johnson County. So that means if you're shopping under 300 grand, that's 4% of the inventory. That's very low. Jackson County is going to be your affordability haven, if you will, right? This is going to be the side of the line that is the last frontier, that if you want to buy a home, and 55% of the sales in Jackson County are under 300,000. 4% in Johnson County, 55% in That's an incredible number that you will hear nowhere else. But that's a really important thing for you to understand if you're thinking about buying a home, right? Now, the metro-wide, as I said, the average is 435. Very misleading if it's inflated by 130,000 solely due to Johnson County's high-end luxury sales. So when you see most market reports, you're not going to be able to determine what that actually means to you. It's really just a billboard for the agent to say, here's the market. But they haven't really dug into that to see what that really means for individual buyers and sellers, right? So what's important is, I think the story, if you go through the notes here, because it's probably even easier in this case to follow than my narrative, is that Johnson County continues to soar with much better appreciation and higher luxury sales. Jackson County continues to be a safe place if you're looking to spend under 300,000, and the average in Jackson County is staying relatively low, which I think can be a very good thing as well. And by the way, just to clarify, the prices are still going up in both counties, right? I think I shared those numbers with you earlier, but just to be clear, I'm not saying it makes sense to buy a house in Johnson County. You shouldn't buy one in Jackson. All I'm suggesting is there is data that supports a little bit different metrics in terms of where the market's going. If you're a buyer or seller, that's something you need to know. So the bottom line, though, is Johnson County is a stronger seller's market driven by school districts and luxury sales. Jackson County is a transitioning market where buyers finally have some breathing room. All right, so that's the market update. Again, the email is david@vannoyre.com. Call the office, or you can always DM here. We'd be happy to talk to you about your specific situation. Take care.